Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing that every problem you thought was out there was actually inside you. Imagine discovering that the distance between the life you have and the life you want is not measured in miles, money, or motivation, but in how willing you are to face the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. If that idea makes you uncomfortable, good, because discomfort is the doorway to transformation. And today, I want to walk you through that doorway. We spend so much time trying to fix the world, our relationships, our jobs, our finances, our circumstances, yet very little time fixing the one thing everything depends on: ourselves. We want better outcomes without becoming better people. We want clarity while holding on to chaos. We want growth without giving up old versions of ourselves that no longer serve us. The truth is simple. Your life changes the moment you take responsibility for it. Not when you blame, not when you complain, not when you wait. But when you look yourself in the mirror and say, I am the problem and I am the solution. Awareness is the first repair. You cannot fix what you refuse to see. Most people walk through life with their eyes open, but their minds closed. They react without understanding, judge without listening, and repeat the same mistakes expecting different results. The moment you begin to observe yourself, to question your patterns, your triggers, your fears, you reclaim control. Every habit you have is doing one of two things. Either it is building the person you want to become, or it is strengthening the person you're desperately trying to stop being. Fixing yourself is not about punishing your flaws. It's about upgrading your operating system. It's about asking, why do I react this way? Why do I keep repeating this pattern? What one am I protecting? What truth am I hiding from? Because until you face the truth, you repeat the cycle. Honesty requires courage. The kind of courage that says, I will no longer run from the parts of myself I don't like. That vulnerability is not weakness. It is the birthplace of strength. Healing doesn't happen when you pretend everything is fine. Healing begins when you admit something isn't. And hear this. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. You can dream big, and you should. But dreams without discipline are illusions. Fixing yourself means building systems, habits, routines, standards that turn your dreams into something you can touch. It means choosing discipline over drama, consistency over convenience, purpose over comfort. There's another truth we rarely acknowledge. You attract who you are, not who you wish to be, not who you pretend to be, but who you truly are. If your life is filled with chaos, look at the chaos within. If you meet the same kind of people over and over, look at the energy you carry. If you feel undervalued, ask whether you value yourself. Fix the root, and the fruit changes. But let me make something clear. Fixing yourself is not a one-day event. It is a lifelong commitment, a daily promise. There will be days you disappoint yourself, days you fall back, days you feel lost. That's okay. Growth is not linear. The goal is not perfection. It's progress. Every morning you have the chance to choose differently, to act better, to live better. Fixing yourself means you stop negotiating with your excuses. It means you stop letting fear decide your future. It means you stop waiting for someone else to save you, validate you, or show you who you are. Because the power to change your life is not in anyone else's hands, only yours. And the moment you take responsibility for that power, you stop being a victim of your life and you become the creator of it. So if you truly want to fix your life, start by fixing yourself, your habits, your mindset, your beliefs, your standards, your choices. Everything else will follow. And when you look back, you'll realize something profound. The world didn't change. Your relationships didn't magically improve. Opportunities didn't suddenly appear. You changed. And when you change, everything else changes with you. That is how you fix yourself. That is how you build a life worth living. Real change begins when you stop blaming the world and start observing yourself. It sounds simple, almost too simple, but the moment you let it in, everything shifts. Because as long as you believe the world is the reason you're stuck, powerless, or behind, you've already surrendered control. Blame creates an illusion of relief, a momentary feeling that the problem isn't your fault. But beneath that illusion is the deeper truth: blaming the world doesn't change anything. It only keeps you exactly where you are. The more time you spend pointing outward, the less time you spend growing inward. And if you are not growing, you are repeating. If you are not evolving, you are circling the same patterns, the same regrets, the same disappointments dressed in different situations. Observing yourself, however, is uncomfortable. It asks you to sit with your own flaws, your own insecurities, your own limitations. It asks you to question your habits, your reactions, your beliefs. It asks you to be honest, not about the world, but about you. And honesty with yourself is the hardest type of honesty because you can't lie without knowing you're lying. You can't hide without knowing you're hiding. You can't pretend without feeling the weight of the prints on your chest. But that discomfort is not a punishment, it is an invitation. It is your inner compass pulling you toward the version of yourself you're capable of becoming, not just the version you've been settling for. When you stop blaming the world, you start noticing patterns, your patterns. You realize that the same situations keep happening, not because the world is unfair, but because your choices are familiar. You begin to see that your triggers come from unresolved experiences, your reactions come from unexamined wounds, and your limitations come from beliefs you adopted long before you were old enough to challenge them. Self-observation is like turning on a light in a dark room. The mess was always there, but now you can finally see it. and only what you can see can be cleaned, improved, or transformed. The moment you begin observing yourself, you realize something powerful. Most of your life isn't shaped by what happens to you, but by how you respond to what happens. Two people can face the same challenge. One grows from it, the other collapses. The difference is not the challenge, it's the internal framework each person brings. That framework is built from your habits, your mindset, your emotional wiring, your self-awareness. If you never look inward, that framework stays the same, and so does your life. You can change your job, your city, your partner, your friends, yet end up feeling the same, because wherever you go, you take yourself with you. When you stop blaming external forces, you reclaim your power. Suddenly, your life is not something happening to you. It is something shaped by you. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop waiting for someone to choose you, validate you, save you, or fix things for you. You stop expecting the world to change before you do. Real change begins in the quiet moments when you admit that you have a role in your own suffering, not because you enjoy blaming yourself, but because acknowledging your role means you also have the power to change the outcome. Observation is not judgment. It is awareness. It is the ability to say, I reacted that way because I was afraid, or I avoided that opportunity because I doubted myself, or I pushed that person as I didn't know how to receive love. When you observe without shaming yourself, you begin to understand yourself. Understanding leads to healing. Healing leads to growth. Growth leads to transformation. And transformation leads to freedom. The freedom to choose differently, to behave differently, to live differently. Consider the people who inspire you most. They are not the ones who blame the world for every setback. They are the ones who say, this is where I went wrong, and this is how I'm going to rise. They are the ones who take responsibility not as a burden, but as an opportunity. Responsibility is not weight, it is wings. It gives you the ability to lift yourself out of your circumstances rather than sink into them. But self-observation also reveals something more subtle, the beliefs you inherited but never examined. Maybe you learned as a child that you're not good enough, and without realizing it, you've been living your entire life trying to prove that belief wrong or avoid situations that might confirm it. Maybe you learned to seek approval instead of building confidence. Maybe you learned to stay small because standing out made someone else uncomfortable. These beliefs are like invisible strings controlling your behavior. You can't cut strings you refuse to see. Observing yourself shows you what is pulling you, what is limiting you, what is driving you. And once you see the strings, you gain the power to cut them. Blaming the world keeps you powerless. Observing yourself makes you powerful. Blame says, I can't change anything because everything is outside my control. Observation says, I can change everything because I can change myself. That doesn't mean the world is perfect or that unfair things don't happen. They do. But unfair moments don't define your life. Your response to them does. Some people face unimaginable challenges and still find resilience, gratitude, and strength. Others collapse under minor inconveniences. The difference is not the world, it's the lens through which they view themselves. When you observe yourself, even your flaws become tools for growth. If you tend to procrastinate, it means you fear failure or discomfort. If you get angry easily, it means you're protecting a wound that needs healing. If you sabotage opportunities, it means you don't believe you're worthy yet. These are not shameful truths, they are stepping stones. Every observation is a step forward. Every moment of self-awareness is a new beginning. And the most extraordinary part, the world around you begins to change the moment you do. People respond differently. Opportunities appear where you once saw obstacles. Your relationships improve because you communicate from clarity instead of insecurity. Your decisions improve because you act from intention instead of reaction. Your life improves because you are no longer repeating old patterns, you are rewriting them. This is why real change begins with self-observation, because the world is a mirror. It reflects you back to you. If you see chaos, look for the chaos within. If you see negativity, look for the beliefs fueling it. If you see stagnation, look for the fear holding you in place. When you change internally, the reflection changes automatically. Not because the world transformed, but because you did. And the beautiful thing is, self-observation is available to you right now. You don't need money, permission, or perfect conditions. All you need is willingness to pause, to reflect, to question, to be honest. Willingness to stop saying, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this trying to teach me? When you make that shift, everything opens, everything expands, everything becomes possible. Real change doesn't begin when the world becomes easier, kinder, or more predictable. Real change begins when you stop blaming the world and start observing yourself. Because that is the moment you take your power back. That is the moment you step into responsibility, awareness, growth, and transformation. That is the moment you become the kind of person who doesn't wait for life to get better, but becomes better for the life they want to live. You can't fix what you refuse to acknowledge. Awareness is the first repair. Every broken pattern, every repeated mistake, every hidden fear grows stronger in the dark. What you ignore doesn't disappear, it expands. What you silence doesn't become harmless, it becomes louder in ways you don't expect. And what you refuse to face eventually becomes the very thing that controls you. The truth is simple, but people run from it every day. Denial may protect your comfort, but it destroys your progress. Until you acknowledge the truth about yourself, your habits, and your choices, nothing in your life can truly change. Awareness isn't about beating yourself up. It's not about drowning in guilt or turning your flaws into permanent scars. Awareness is about light. It's about clarity. It's about finally seeing the reality of who you are, not the version you pretend to be, not the version you wish others would believe, not the version that hides behind excuses, but the real, raw, unfiltered you. The version that makes decisions out of fear, the version that struggles to trust, the version that avoids difficult conversations, the version that longs for more but hesitates to reach for it. When you finally acknowledge these parts of yourself, you don't become weaker, you become powerful because you can't transform anything you aren't willing to face. We underestimate how much energy denial steals from us. Hiding from the truth is exhausting. You spend your days pretending everything is fine, even when something inside you is begging for change. You use distractions, work, entertainment, people, habits to numb the discomfort. But numbness isn't healing, avoidance isn't growth, and pretending isn't peace. Awareness demands honesty, and honesty requires courage. Not the loud kind of courage that shouts for attention, but the quiet kind that whispers, "This is who I am right now, and I'm ready to understand why." That whisper is where change begins. The hardest truths to acknowledge are the ones that threaten the way we see ourselves. We like to think we are rational, kind, disciplined, generous, focused, but sometimes we're not. Sometimes we react out of insecurity. Sometimes we avoid responsibility. Sometimes we repeat toxic patterns because they feel familiar. Sometimes we settle for less because we're afraid of losing even that. These truths can be painful to admit, but pain is not your enemy. Pain is information. Pain is a signal that something within you needs attention. When you refuse to acknowledge it, you silence the very signal designed to guide your healing. Awareness also forces you to look at how your past is shaping your present. Many of our adult behaviors are just childhood wounds wearing grown-up clothes. Our fear of confrontation might come from years of being punished for speaking up. Our difficulty trusting others might come from being betrayed when we were vulnerable. Our tendency to overwork might come from believing we're only valuable when we're useful. These patterns don't make you flawed, they make you human. But they won't change until you acknowledge where they come from and how they've been directing your life. Awareness doesn't erase the past, but it frees you from being defined by it. The irony of self-awareness is that the moment you acknowledge something, it loses its power over you. The moment you say, "I get angry because I'm scared," the anger softens. The moment you say, "I avoid things because I'm overwhelmed," avoidance becomes optional. The moment you say, "I sabotage opportunities because I don't believe I deserve them," sabotage becomes a choice rather than an automatic reaction. Naming the truth breaks the spell. It brings you back into the driver's seat of your own life. But acknowledging the truth is uncomfortable, and that's why most people avoid it. Comfort feels safe, even when it's slowly destroying you. Change feels risky, even when it's exactly what you need. You convince yourself that if you ignore a problem long enough, it will solve itself. But problems don't heal with silence. They grow in silence. Think of a crack in the foundation of a home. You can paint over it, you can place furniture in front of it, you can avoid looking at it for years. But the crack is still there, spreading, deepening, weakening everything it touches. Acknowledging the crack doesn't fix it. But it's the only step that gives you the chance to repair it before it becomes irreversible. Awareness doesn't mean you instantly know how to fix everything. It simply means you're no longer pretending, you're no longer lying to yourself. You're no longer hiding from the truth. That honesty creates space to learn, space to grow, space to choose differently. When you see a flaw clearly, you can build a strategy around it. When you understand a weakness, you can develop strength. When you recognize a pattern, you can interrupt it. But you can't change what you refuse to see. Acknowledgement also removes the shame that comes from secrecy. Shame thrives in the dark, feeding on silence and isolation. But when you look at yourself honestly, you take away its fuel. You realize that imperfections don't make you broken, they make you human. Everyone has flaws, everyone has blind spots. Everyone has patterns they struggle to break. Awareness doesn't make you inferior. It makes you aware that you're not alone. And from that place, you can grow without expecting perfection from yourself. Awareness teaches you to respond instead of react. When you know why you're triggered, you can pause. When you know what scares you, you can breathe before you speak. When you know what drives your decisions, you can choose whether that driver still serves you. Most people live on autopilot, repeating their past every day without realizing it. Awareness hits the brakes. It gives you the chance to interrupt the automatic responses that once controlled you. It gives you the freedom to create a life based on intention rather than instinct. And perhaps the most powerful aspect of awareness is how it changes the way you see responsibility. People fear responsibility because they think it means blame. But responsibility isn't about fault. It's about empowerment. When you acknowledge your role in your outcomes, you gain the ability to create different outcomes. When you acknowledge that a habit is hurting you, you gain the ability to replace it. When you acknowledge that a belief is limiting you, you gain the ability to challenge it. When you acknowledge that you're holding yourself back, you gain the ability to move forward. Awareness transforms responsibility from something heavy into something liberating. You can't fix what you refuse to acknowledge. You can't grow from what you won't look at. You can't heal from what you keep hidden. Pretending doesn't protect you, it paralyzes you. Ignoring the truth doesn't make you strong, it makes you stuck. Healing begins the moment you open your eyes to yourself. Growth begins the moment you stop denying your patterns. Freedom begins the moment you face your truth without fear. Awareness is not the repair itself, but it is the unlock. It is the doorway through which every repair becomes possible. And once you walk through it, you never go back to who you were before, because now you see and you can unsee. Your habits are either holding you hostage or setting you free. Choose consciously. Every day, whether you realize it or not, you are training yourself. You are rehearsing a version of yourself through the small actions you repeat. Most people imagine that their lives are shaped by big decisions, choosing a career, choosing a partner, choosing a direction. But the truth is far simpler and far more powerful. Your life is shaped by the habits you practice when no one is watching. The small decisions you make every morning, every evening, every moment of temptation or distraction are the ones that quietly write the story of who you become. Habits are not random behaviors, they are agreements you make with your future. And every habit is either building a better life or building a barrier between you and the life you want. When habits hold you hostage, you don't notice it at first. They slip into your life disguised as comfort, convenience, or routine. You tell yourself you'll change later. You tell yourself you'll start tomorrow. You convince yourself that the little things you do every day don't matter. But the little things always matter because they compound. A single day of procrastination is harmless. A single day of negative self-talk seems insignificant. A single day of skipping your priorities feels forgivable. But when those days multiply, they become your identity. You don't create your future in one day, you create it through the days you repeat. And if those days are filled with habits that drain your energy, limit your potential, or sabotage your dreams, you eventually find yourself trapped by a life you never consciously chose. Hostage habits don't feel dangerous, they feel familiar. They whisper, just stay where you are. They offer temporary relief at the cost of long-term regret. The habit of avoiding difficult conversations keeps you safe for a moment, but steals your relationships over time. The habit of seeking validation gives you comfort for a second, but weakens your confidence for years. The habit of always choosing what is easy instead of what is meaningful creates a life that looks calm on the surface but feels empty underneath. These habits create a quiet prison, one you don't notice until the walls feel too tight to escape. On the other hand, liberating habits rarely feel good in the beginning. They require discomfort, intention, and courage. They demand that you choose growth over ease, clarity over confusion, discipline over impulse. The habit of waking up early to work on your goals doesn't feel rewarding on day one, but it transforms your sense of control over time. The habit of reading, learning, reflecting, and expanding your mind doesn't offer instant gratification, but it sharpens your thinking and opens new possibilities. The habit of speaking honestly, setting boundaries, protecting your inner peace. All of these feel challenging at first, but they free your future from unnecessary pain, chaos, and regret. Most people wait for motivation to change their habits, but motivation is unreliable. It rises and falls with emotion, circumstance, and mood. Habits built on motivation collapse when you're tired, discouraged, or overwhelmed. Habits built on identity endure. When you tell yourself, I'm the kind of person who follows through, your behavior aligns with that belief even on difficult days. When you tell yourself, I'm the kind of person who takes care of my mind and body, your choices naturally reflect that truth. Your habits are a mirror of what you believe about yourself. To change your habits, you often have to change the story you tell yourself. Choosing consciously means paying attention to the small moments. It means noticing the invisible autopilot that controls your day. It means asking yourself, is this habit making me stronger or weaker? Is this habit bringing me closer to the life I want or pulling me further away? It means being honest about the patterns you've been pretending not to see. Because once you see a habit clearly, you can't unsee it. You either choose to keep it or choose to replace it. But the illusion of powerlessness disappears. The truth is your habits are always casting votes. Every good habit casts a vote for your future self. Every destructive habit casts a vote against your potential. No single vote decides the outcome on its own, but the pattern of votes determines who you become. You don't need perfection to change your life. You need consistency. You need the willingness to choose one small action each day that aligns with the future you want. Change doesn't require dramatic reinvention. It requires small, repeated steps in the same direction. Habits are also deeply connected to your environment. It's difficult to practice discipline in a space filled with distractions. It's difficult to think clearly in a space filled with noise. It's difficult to grow around people who prefer the version of you that stays the same. Your environment shapes your habits just as much as your habits shape your life. That's why choosing your surroundings consciously is an act of self-respect. If you want to be focused, surround yourself with focus. If you want to be inspired, surround yourself with inspiration. If you want to grow, surround yourself with people who value growth. The right environment makes good habits feel natural and destructive ones feel out of place. One of the most important parts of conscious habit building is understanding that you don't break bad habits by fighting them, you replace them. When you try to eliminate a habit without giving yourself an alternative, your mind rebels. It craves the familiar. But when you replace the habit of scrolling with the habit of reading, the habit of complaining with the habit of reflecting, the habit of avoiding with the habit of acting, you create new pathways that eventually feel just as natural as the old ones. This is how transformation works. Not through force, but through intention. The habits that set you free are the ones that align your daily actions with the person you want to become. They don't just change your schedule, they change your identity. They build discipline, confidence, clarity, resilience, and purpose. They make you feel in control of your life instead of reacting to every challenge blindly. They help you show up consistently, not because life is easy, but because you are prepared. And perhaps the most powerful truth of all is this: you are always one habit away from a better life, one decision away from a new identity, one choice away from breaking the cycle. You don't need to fix everything at once. You don't need to transform overnight. You just need to choose consciously, one action at a time. Your habits are the architects of your destiny. They are writing your story even when you're not paying attention. And every day, you get to decide which part of the story you write next. Are your habits holding you hostage, keeping you small, comfortable, stagnant, and afraid? Or are your habits setting you free, expanding your possibilities, strengthening your character, and pulling you closer to the life you've always wanted? The choice is always yours. Choose consciously. Healing requires honesty, and honesty requires courage. There is no shortcut through this truth. You cannot heal what you continue to hide from, and you cannot face what you are unwilling to admit. Healing is not a process of pretending everything is fine. It is not about masking your pain with positivity or distracting yourself with noise. Healing starts the moment you stop running. It starts the moment you finally sit with yourself, your fears, your wounds, your regrets, and say, "This is where I am. This is what hurts. This is what I need to understand." That moment is not comfortable, but it is transformative. It is the beginning of becoming whole. Honesty is the doorway through which healing walks in, and yet it is the doorway most people avoid. Because honesty demands that you confront the parts of yourself you'd rather ignore. It asks you to look at the ways you've contributed to your own heartbreak, the patterns you've repeated, the choices you've made out of fear instead of intention. It asks you to acknowledge the truth about your relationships, your habits, your beliefs. Honesty exposes the gaps between who you are and who you want to be, between what you say and what you do, between the life you desire and the life you're living. That exposure feels vulnerable, and vulnerability feels risky. That's why honesty requires courage. Courage to tell yourself the truth even when it hurts. Courage to admit that you're not okay, that you need help, that you've made mistakes. Courage to acknowledge the wounds that shaped you but no longer define you. Courage to take responsibility for your healing instead of waiting for someone else to fix what only you can face. People often think of courage as something loud, standing tall, fighting battles, taking bold action. But real courage is quiet. It's the courage to sit in silence with your own truth. It's the courage to feel what you've avoided feeling. It's the courage to stop blaming the world long enough to recognize where your power begins. It's the courage to peel back the layers you've built to protect yourself and examine what lies beneath them. Healing isn't the absence of pain. Healing is the presence of truth. And truth is often painful before it becomes liberating. You may discover that the pain you've been carrying for years was never fully about the events themselves, but about the stories you told yourself afterward. Stories of unworthiness, stories of abandonment, stories of failure. You may discover that your defensiveness comes from old wounds that were never acknowledged. You may discover that your anger is actually grief. You may discover that your sadness is actually exhaustion. You may discover that your patterns of self-sabotage are not flaws, but survival mechanisms you learned long ago. And once you see those things clearly, you realize you've been living in emotional autopilot, repeating what once protected you but now restricts you. Healing begins with asking yourself honest questions. Questions like, what am I afraid to admit? What am I avoiding? What story am I still holding on to that no longer serves me? What am I pretending not to know? These questions pull you inward. They bring your pain out of hiding. They invite your heart into the conversation. And the answers, when you give yourself permission to hear them, become the foundation of your healing. But honesty is not just about acknowledging pain. It's also about acknowledging your desire to grow beyond it. It's about recognizing that the life you want requires a version of you who is no longer burdened by what you've been carrying. It's about recognizing your own worthiness. Worthiness of peace, worthiness of joy, worthiness of connection, worthiness of healing. Sometimes the hardest honesty is admitting that you deserve better than what you've been tolerating from others or even from yourself. Healing requires courage because change requires courage. Letting go of pain means stepping into unfamiliar territory. Letting go of an identity built around struggle or disappointment means redefining who you are. Healing is not simply about mending the old. It's about making room for the new. And that transition is one of the bravest things a person can do. As you become honest with yourself, you begin to see the world differently. You stop expecting others to heal wounds they didn't cause. You stop waiting for apologies that may never come. You stop holding yourself hostage to past chapters that no longer define you. You begin to understand that healing is not something given to you. It is something grown within you. And it grows every time you choose truth over avoidance, awareness over denial, growth over comfort. Honesty also brings clarity to your relationships. When you are honest with yourself, You recognize which connections nurture your healing and which ones hinder it. You see the people who challenge you to grow and the ones who keep you stuck in old patterns. You see who supports your boundaries and who violates them. You see who communicates with respect and who manipulates with silence. Healing gives you the courage to make choices rooted in self-respect rather than fear of loss. And as you grow through honesty, compassion begins to bloom. You start to understand why you reacted the way you did, why you held on to certain people, why certain situations triggered you, why certain patterns repeated. Compassion softens the judgment you once carried toward yourself. It allows you to look at your past self not with shame, but with understanding. It allows you to recognize that every version of you was doing the best they could with the awareness they had. Healing requires honesty, and honesty requires courage, but courage becomes easier with practice. The first truth is the hardest. The first moment of vulnerability is the most intimidating. The first confrontation with your own patterns feels overwhelming. But every time you choose honesty, the fear shrinks. Every time you face a truth, you grow stronger. Every time you acknowledge a wound, you reclaim another piece of yourself. Eventually, you realize that honesty is not a threat. It's a gift. It doesn't break you. It frees you. It frees you from denial, from guilt, from shame, from confusion. It frees you from living a life that doesn't belong to you. It frees you to finally become the person you were meant to be. Healing is not a straight line. It is a process of returning to yourself again and again with honesty and courage. But every time you return, you rise a little higher. Every time you face your truth, you grow a little stronger. And eventually, you discover something extraordinary. The pain that once felt impossible to face becomes the source of your greatest strength. Not because it disappeared, but because you had the courage to be honest enough to heal it. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Goals sound inspiring, but systems determine reality. Anyone can dream of becoming healthier, wealthier, stronger, kinder, more disciplined, more successful. Anyone can imagine a future version of themselves who wakes up early, exercises regularly, builds meaningful relationships, and lives with purpose. But that version of you does not appear because you want it. It appears because you built the daily structures that support it. Without systems, goals are nothing more than hopes floating in the air. With systems, even the most ambitious dream becomes inevitable. A goal is the destination, but a system is the path. And it's the path that determines whether you reach the destination or get lost along the way. You don't succeed because you desire success. You succeed because you practice the habits that make success unavoidable. You don't become disciplined because you admire discipline. You become disciplined because you create routines that leave no room for excuses. You don't become a better version of yourself by imagining that version. You become that version by designing the daily actions that shape your identity. Systems are the invisible architecture of your life. They shape your behavior, and your behavior shapes your destiny. When people fail to achieve their goals, they often blame their motivation or willpower. They think they weren't inspired enough or determined enough. But the truth is, motivation is unreliable. Willpower is inconsistent. Emotion fluctuates. Life gets busy. Stress gets heavy. If you rely on motivation to carry you forward, you will quit the moment discomfort shows up. But if you rely on systems, clear routines, structured habits, intentional environments, you continue moving forward even on the days when you don't feel like it. Systems protect you from your weaker moments. They turn discipline into default. A system